Good morning, ma'am. I'm Prititi Alam, student of third year BSc Nursing from University College of Nursing and JNMH. So, today the topic of my presentation is management of a child with worm infestations or helminthiasis. So, the date of my presentation is today, that is 18th February 2021. So, let's get started. So here comes the content of my presentations. First of all comes introduction, then definition, that is followed by types of causative agents, which is further followed by pathogenesis, clinical manifestations, diagnosis, management, preventive measures, and then complications. And the next part, that is conclusion and bibliography. So here is the introductory part. Worm infestations are long-term diseases that produce few symptoms in their early stages and sometimes serious effects at well-developed stages, may be quite fatal at times. So here is the definition. Helminthias is a macroparasitic disease of humans and animals in parts of the body which is infested with parasitic worms or helminths. Now, in this case, what do you mean by macroparasites? Now, in this case, what do you mean by macroparasite? Macroparasites are multicellular organisms that typically do not multiply within their final or definitive host, but infested instead produces a transmission of stage, that is eggs and larvae, that pass into the external environment. Okay, so here the definition is now stated completely. So if you have any doubt, you can ask. Okay, now I'm moving to the next part, that is the types of the causative agents. The helminthiasis is broadly divided into three parts, that is nematodes, cystodes, trematodes, and further nematodes are divided into intestinal nematodes and then tissue nematodes. And we can see that intestinal nematodes are divided into 5 subgroups, which is roundworm, that is Ascaris lumbricoides, pinworm or threadworm, that is Enterobius vermicularis, hookworm, that is Ankylostoma duodenale and Niceter americanus, whipworm, that is Trichuris trichura, and finally Strongyloids turcoralis. And then comes the tissue nematodes. Tissue nematodes are divided into 2 parts. First of all comes the lymphatic filariasis, that is Wuchereria bancrofti and Brugemellii. Then comes the Dracunculus medinensis, which is also known as Guinea worm. So the next point is cystodes. Under the cystode, there are 3 organisms. First of all comes the tapeworms, which includes the Taenia saginata and Taenia solium. Then comes the dwarf tapeworm, that is Hymenolepis nana. And then comes the Echinococcosis E multilocularis and E granulosus. Here E stands for Echinococcosis, Echinococcus multilocularis and Echinococcus granulosus. And then comes the trematodes. Trematodes are divided into fishworms, flukes, and Schistoma mansoni. So here I have elaborated these types basically by the means of transmission, about its length about its morphology and its way of invading the human body. That's it. So let's get started. And along with this, I have also prepared a flip chart of this topic and in this point. So I will attach to it also along with this. So go through that also. I hope that will help you to clear the difficulties of understanding these types. Thank you. So the next point is roundworms. So here we can see a male and female bodies are getting shown. So see here, this is a female Ascaris lumbricoides and this is a male Ascaris lumbricoides. Ascaris lumbricoides is a nematode, mostly known as roundworm. It's the most common helminthic infestation and it lives in the lumen of small intestine. The adult female roundworm measures about 20 to 40 centimeter and a male are about 12 to 30 centimeter in length. Each female roundworm produces about 240,000 eggs per day, and the host of these are the definitive host of these are humans. And the vulnerability, that is the infection rates are high in children and they are the most important disseminators of infection. Then comes the mode of transmission. It's a soil transmitted helminth. Mode of transmission is fecal-oral route by ingestion of infective eggs with food or soil drink or by contaminated hands and fingers. And here I have attached a clear visualization of this Ascaris lumbricoides, morphology of this. First of all, this is anus and these are the tails and this is cloaca, this coil part, and up to this there is ventral lines along with this, and this is the head of the male and this is the head of the female. So the incubation period of it is about 2 months. So now moving to the next member of it, that is pinworms or threadworms, that is Oxyureasis. Infestation with Enterobius vermicularis, Oxyureasis vermicularis is commonly known as pinworm or young children. In young children and pinworm or threadworm in young children. Sorry for the mistake. And each egg measures about 30 to 60 mcm and matures after 20 days. Female worms are average 8 to 13 millimeter in length and males are about 2 to 5 millimeter. The vulnerability of these are infants and young children because they are most susceptible to it. The host of pinworms are man is the only host or definitive host of pinworms, and in this case the mode of transmission is mainly by auto-infection. Eggs are carried under the fingernails and contaminated during the perianal scratching. So what do you mean by auto-infection? Auto-infection is a reinfection with larvae produced by parasitic worms already in the body. So pinworms' main mode of transmission is auto-infection. This should be remembered. And there is a diagram that I have put on there, and this shows the anus of it and the opening of the vagina and intestines, bulb, vesicles, reproductive system, esophagus, mouth, and these are the membranes. Now moving to the next page, that is this member is hookworms. This member is called hookworms, or this causes the ankylostomiasis. Hookworm is a nematode causing intestinal infestation in human by 2 species. First of all, that is Ankylostoma duodenale and then Niceter americanus. Here is a picture of Niceter americanus, you can see here, and epidemiology of it. Ankylostoma duodenale is mainly found in North India and Niceter americanus in South India. Another species, that is Ankylostoma silentium, has been reported from a village near Calcutta. Male worm is 5 to 11 millimeter long and female worm is about 9 to 13 millimeter long with dorsally curved anterior end or hook. One female Ankylostoma duodenale produces about 30,000 eggs and one female Niceter americanus produces about 9,000 eggs per day. And this is one of the pictures of Ankylostoma duodenale female one, and this is the male one. As I can elaborate this is the mouthpiece of the male one and this is the female hookworm structure. And the mode of transmission is by skin penetration in barefooted individual. And in this case you can see there is a picture of a larva migrant. That is, in this case the hookworm has been transmitted from the barefooted individual. Okay, this is the path. This is the path of the movement of pinworm, hookworm. The worm may also transmit by oral route with direct ingestion of infective larvae via contaminated foods and vegetables. An incubation period. So what do you mean by incubation period? Incubation period is the number of days between when you are infected and something and infected with something and when you might see the symptoms. Is it clear? I'll repeat. The incubation period is a number of days between the days you have infected with the organism or something and when you might see the symptoms. This is the gap. For Niceter americanus, it's about 7 weeks, and for Ankylostoma duodenale, it varies from 5 weeks to 9 months. There is a picture I have attached to it. For your kind informations and references, you can view this. Then the next page, that is whipworm, Trichuris trichura. Trichuris inhabits the large intestine. The females can grow up to 50 millimeter long and eggs are infective and about 2 to 3 weeks after they are deposited in the soil under proper conditions of warmth and moisture. Epidemiology, it mainly has tropical distribution as it grows in warmth and moisture, as I have told before. And then comes the vulnerability. Children are specially vulnerable due to their high exposure risk. And mode of transmission is fecal-oral route via contaminated nail dirt properly uncooked food. And here is a picture that I have attached here. That is an adult male Trichuris trichura that has a curved tail and a head here. Can see here a curved tail with a head, and this is a female Trichuris trichura which is mainly longer than the male. And the next member is Strongyloids tucuralis. Strongyloids is a unique creature, and it's the intestinal nematodes in several respects. It's an interesting nematode in several respects. Larvae divide parthenogenetically in small intestine, and development of the eggs into infective larvae occurs within the intestine. So what do you mean by parthenogenetically? Right? Parthenogenesis is a form of reproduction in which an egg can develop into an embryo without being fertilized by a sperm. Parthenogenesis is derived from a Greek word for virgin birth. So now I hope it's clear. So larvae divided into by parthenogenetically, and the mode of transmission is autoinfections and retroinfections. So autoinfections I have told before, reinfection by the larva that is already in the body of the host. Retroinfection. So what is retroinfection? Is the migration of newly hatched larvae from the anal skin back into the rectum. This may occur, but the frequency of which in which this happens is unknown. There is some information about it. That is a habitat. Female lives in the superficial tissues of the small intestine, that is duodenum and jejunum. Definitive host is humans, dogs and cats. Route of infection, that is filariform larva penetrate the skin of human. Infective stage, third stage larva, filariform. Diagnostic stage, that is first stage larva, that is rhabditiform in feces, and geographical distribution, that is cosmopolitan parasite, mainly in moist and warm areas of low hygiene. Here is a picture that I have attached to it. Take a look. This is the isthmus, this is the corpus, then isthmus, then valvulated bulb, then genital primordium. And this is the cyst or embryonated egg of Strongyloids stachyoralis. So then comes the tissue nematodes. The members are Wuchereria bancrofti. It's a filarial nematode that is the major cause of lymphatic filariasis, and it's one of the 3 parasitic worms together with Brugia malayi and Brugia tremori. That in fact the lymphatic system to cause the lymphatic filariasis. So the members are again the Wuchereria bancrofti, Brugia malayi and Brugia tremori. Epidemiology. It's endemicin. It's endemic in several Indian states, chiefly Bihar in Calcutta. Bihar in Kerala. As you can see, there should be a space. The male worm is smaller, that is 40 mm long, and features a ventrally carved tail. As we can see, there is a ventrally carved tail. In contrast, the female is 60 millimeter long to 60 to 100 millimeter long, and the host is humans and that are infected by the bite of the vector, that is Culex mosquito. What is vector? You know? Do you know what is vector? So vector are the organism, typically a biting insect or a tick that transmits a disease or parasitic form from one animal to another. Okay, by biting mainly. So it's through their proboscis. Then the lifespan of them. The lifespan of the adult worm is usually 5 to 10 years, but it can be up to 40 years. There I have attached 2 morphological structures of it. So for your confirmation, go through that. Okay. There is oral style, navel ring, and then epidermis, somatic cell, and this is the Wuchereria microfilaria, and this is Wuchereria adult, female and male. Next comes the tapeworms. Tapeworms are cystodes commonly found in children as pork tapeworm. Pork tapeworm is Tinea solium, and the beef tapeworm is Tinea saginata. Epidemiology. Tinea solium infection is endemic in India and many countries in Southern Asia. Human cystosarcosis. This is caused by Tinea solium, and it's a far more important public health problem than human teniasis. Okay, so what is a cystosarcus? Cystosarcus refers to a larval tapeworm at a stage in which the scolex is inverted in a sac. Typically found in they are found encysted in the muscle tissue of the host. So host, that are humans are definitive host of it, and the intermediate host are pigs for Tinea solium and cows for Tinea saginata. The adult Tinea saginata measures about 5 to 12 meters in length and maybe up to 24 meters. That is, Tinea solium measures about 2 to 6 meters. They get attached to the intestinal wall via scolex. So what is scolex, right? Look at this. This is the primary part of, this is the head of a tapeworm, okay? So the scolex is comprised of the rostrum firstly, and then the hooks that can be seen here, the hooks, and typically four suckers that are the round structures, okay? So come back to here where we were before, the scolex. So mode of transmission, and these are, first of all, this is the important topic about the tapeworms. So listen carefully. So mode of transmission, these are, first of all, the consumption of infective cystic in improperly cooked meat of infected pork or beef, and then secondly, the unwashed vegetables, food and water contaminated with eggs, and thirdly, the reinfection by regurgitation of eggs from the small intestine by retroperistosis, and it's a rare case, okay? So adult tapeworms can live up to 30 years in a host. The infected child usually passes 1 to 2 centimeter long segments or proglottids in stool or crawl over the perianal area. The eggs in the stools are swallowed by pigs and cows, and they get infection later on. Okay, so what do you mean by proglottids? So proglottids refers to each segment in the strobila of tapeworm containing a complete sexually mature reproductive system. So these are the mature proglottids. Do you see? These are immature. Okay, and as I go in this way, they are maturing in further. These are immature and they are mature and they are further gravid proglottids. And what do you mean by gravid? That is, they are now capable of producing eggs. Okay. So there is a microscopic picture of scolex. This is what it looks like. These are the hooks, and this is the rostrum, and these are the suckers attached to it here. And this is a tapeworms. This is a picture of the tapeworms in the gut. And then comes the Hymenolepis nana. Infection with Hymenolepis nana, also known as dwarf tapeworm, is very common in developing countries like India. So host, man acts as both definitive and intermediate host as the entire life cycle gets completed in human host. However, rodents, ticks, fleas may serve as the intermediate host. And the habitat is the adult one lives in the jejunum. So jejunum is what? You know, right? The digestive system. The intestine is divided into three. The small intestine is divided into three parts. First of all, duodenum, then jejunum, then ileum. Jejunum is the middle part of it. Then mode of transmission, mainly fecal-oral, and autoinfections may also occur. Hymenolepis nana, this is the scolex, this is immature proglottids and mature proglottids, and these are gravid proglottids. So nextly comes the echinococcosis or hydatid disease. Human echinococcosis occurs due to infection with larvae of Echinococcus granulosus or Echinococcus multilocularis. Definitive hosts are dogs, and intermediate hosts are sheep, cattle, or goats, and that are intermediate host. Man is an accidental intermediate host and habitat. The adult tapeworm commonly lives in the small intestine of dogs for 24 years, 2 to 4 years. Okay. Mode of transmission. So the infection is transmitted through food, water, and washed vegetables contaminated with feces and of infected dogs. An infection can take place while handling or playing with infected dogs. Example, hand to mouth transfer of eggs or by inhalation of dust contaminated with infected eggs. The disease is not directly transmissible from person to person. This is an important line. This is to be remembered. The disease is not directly transmissible from person to person. Important target organs in this case are liver and lungs, where larvae develop into characteristic unilocular and multilocular cyst known as the hydatid cyst. So here we come. That is, what do you mean by unilocular or multilocular cyst? If a cyst has more than one septum, complete septum, it can be classified as multilocular. But a cyst with no complete septum is known as, what is it? Unilocular. Okay, I hope it's clear. So the important target organs are liver and lungs, where the larvae develop into characteristic unilocular and multilocular cyst known as hydatid cyst. And there is a picture attached to it. So there is a head and the neck, germinal mass, uterus, testis, and again there is a more larger part that also shows the uterus here and here. So what is the okay, wait. So what is the difference of them? That is, the first one is quite mature, but the second one is a gravid one. Okay, so this is a gravid proglotid, and this can be seen that it's a picture of the hydatid cyst of the kidney. These are the cysts filled with fluid like substances, and these are the cysts of liver. Okay, then comes the trematodes. Trematodes includes the Dracunculus medinensis, which is also known as Guinea worm. An infection is acquired by drinking contaminated water which contains crustaceans. So what are the crustaceans? Crustaceans form a large diverse arthropod taxon, which includes such animals as crabs, lobsters, crayfish, shrimps, prawns, krill, woodlice, and barnacles. Okay, so next move to the next part, that is Schistoma mansoni or Schistoma hematobiomchos. Cystomaniasis or blood fluke, that is flatworm. This infestation may occur through penetration of intact skin by cysticerci. Snails are primary intermediate host of it. So here is one picture of a fluke, liver fluke. This is completely flat, so it is also known as flatworms. So now moving to the part that is pathogenesis. So first of all comes the intestinal nematodes, and under that we first get the Ascaris lumbricoides. So here we can see, first of all comes these are adults in small intestine. Okay, first of all, the eggs are released in the soil, and the unfertilized eggs we can see here. Then further by attained course of time, they are then fertilized, and after fertilization they are ingested through the food or water consumption by humans, as humans are the host of it. So then the embryonated larvae are getting into the body of the human host, and they hatch larvae into the circulation of the circulation and migrate to the lungs, and from the intestine it goes to the lungs and then often regurgitated and re-swallowed through the intestine again. So see the path. First of all, it's going to lungs. Okay, then after the lungs, the larvae are coughed up and swallowed. That is re-entering the gastrointestinal tract, and maturation proceeds in the small intestine. So this is clear. That is, first of all, it's residing in this place, and then it's moving through circulation in lungs, and after going to lungs, it's coming out from the airway tract, and then from the gullet it's moving to the glottis again, and from glottis it's going to the esophagus, and from esophagus it's going to the stomach and then intestine. Okay, so go through it for further definition and better understanding. I'm just telling it once and you should review it further. And then the interbiotic vermicularies, first of all the eggs on perianal folds are released, and the larvae inside of the eggs mature within 4 to 6 hours, and the membranated eggs are ingested by humans, and then the larvae hatch in the small intestine. There is a sea green one. Can you see? There is a sea green one. So there is a mature adults. There is adults of lumen in cecum. This is known as cecum. There is the first part of the large intestine, and then gravid female migrates to perianal region at night to lay eggs. Okay, then the cycle again continues. So the diagnostic stage of this is what? The diagnostic stage of this is the eggs on perianal stage. This can be diagnosed by further techniques such as the Scotch tape technique. Then the intestinal hookworm. First of all, the eggs in feces are found, and rapidiform larva hatches and development of the larva from environment. Then the filarian larva, the filariform larva, penetrates the skin in barefooted individual, and the larva, the ankylostoma eggs, we can see the ankylostoma species. In ankylostoma species, the larva can become developmentally arrested and dormant in tissues, and reactivated larva may enter the small intestine again. So here the picture shows here. Okay, look at this red arrows. It's from going to stomach, from the gut, and there it's often getting re-swallowed and then coming back. And in this case, in this place, the larva can be dormant and they can reside for further time in order to reactivate and produce disease symptoms later. And then the larva exits circulation in the lungs, and they are then coughed up and swallowed. As I had told before, the red arrows are indicating that. And then the adults in the small intestine are again formed, and the eggs and feces are again excreted. So here is a cycle that is repeated again and again. And then coming to the trichuria, first of all, there is a unmembranated eggs are there, passed in the feces and two-stage stage. Advanced cleavage happens, and membranated eggs are ingested, and then the larva hatch in small intestine. Okay. Then the Strongyloides stercoralis. In this case, the dogs are main mediators of this infection or pathogenesis. Rapidiform larvae in the intestine are excreted in the stool, and then they are often passed into the infective. They are produced by the fertilized female worms. They fertilize after fertilization. They are again ingested by the infected dogs, or mainly by the humans, and then the autoinfections happens, and the eggs are again getting formed. Then eggs again get formed in case of the human host, and parasitic adult females in the small intestine, they develop in mature one, so they are now capable of producing eggs, and they lay eggs again, and the cycle continues it further. And so now the tissue nematodes. Here we can see, then this is the filariasis. In this case, first of all, the mosquito bites the human and then ingests the microfilaria. Then after that, the microfilaria sails to penetrate the mosquito's midgut and migrate to the thoracic muscles. And then L1 larva and from L3 larva gets formed and migrate into the head of the mosquito, and the proboscis also. And mosquito takes a blood meal then, and then through the proboscis, the microfilaria or L3 larvae enter the skin of the human host. So then after in humans, the adults in lymphatics proliferate and adults produce sheathed microfilaria that migrate into lymph and blood channels. Okay. So nextly, this is filariasis again, and this is you can see it there. This is a case of Brugia malai, and this was what? This was of Wuchereria bancrofti. So you can review it there. It's quite similar. Cystodes, in this case, they are mainly transmitted by the pigs or cows. Here the Taenia saginata and Taenia solium pigs, and these are the humans ingesting raw and cooked infected meat, right? So look at that. And this is occurred by the infection is mainly occurs by the oncospores hatch and penetrate intestinal wall and circulate to musculature. And oncospore develops into cysticercin muscle, cysticercin in muscle, and humans infected by ingested raw and undercooked infected meat. Okay, and scolex attached to the intestine, and adults in small intestine then produces further infection. And there is a final pathogenesis of hydrotic disease, that is echinococcosis. The intermediate hosts are cattle, definitive hosts are mainly dogs. And first of all, the adult in small intestine, then they are inhaled through the humans, and the oncospores are released in the intestine. Hydrotic cyst attacks mainly the bones, the liver, the kidneys, the spleen, the lungs, and then brains and all. And then the oncosphere there hatches and penetrates the intestinal wall, and the hydatid cysts in various organs and commonly in liver and lungs are formed, and protoscolex cyst develops, and then from protoscolex the scolex attaches to the intestine. So this is a cystic echinococcosis. Then coming to the clinical manifestations, the common features are pain in abdomen, abdominal distension, nausea, cough, loss of weight, growth failure, vitamin deficiency, bruxism, and voracious appetite. So what is bruxism, right? Bruxism is nothing but a teeth grinding, especially it's involuntary in nature, and the teeth grinding especially while the child is sleeping. And voracious appetite, voracious means an intimate and extra urge, an unstoppable urge of eating extra food, right? This is called the voracious appetite. And the associated features are the pica. Associated features of the pica, then pica refers to craving or chewing substances that have no nutritional value, such as ice, clay, soil, and paper, and string maybe. And then the sleeplessness, irritability, urticaria. And what is it? Urticaria means a skin rash triggered by a reaction to food, medicine, or other irritants. So urticaria, that is done. And then fever, eosinophilia. Eosinophilia is a sudden increase of the number of eosinophils in the blood. And diarrhea, obstructive jaundice, peritonitis. Peritonitis is the inflammation of peritonitis. Inflammation is the inflammation of the covering in the abdominal wall, inside the abdominal wall, that keeps all of the internal organs in place. And Ascaris pneumonia, that is the Loeffler syndrome. Loeffler syndrome is really important, and it mainly includes the retinal area and the lungs and all. And this, as you can see, it's a pneumonia. Okay, so here is a picture. This is a intestinal obstruction. Is there so many worm load that the intestine is getting enlarged, and these are filled with loads of Ascaris lumbricoides. Okay, and this is a picture of normal lung, and this is of pneumonia. Okay, these are normal and this is pneumonia. And these are the affected lung tissues in this case. And to the next part, that is pinworms or threadworm. General symptoms are poor appetite, loss of weight, treat grinding, abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. And some important manifestations are pruritus ani, vulvovaginitis, secondary infections, irritability, restlessness, sleep disturbances, enuresis, masturbation. So, what are these? Pruritus ani is nothing but an itchy anus. So this is caused by the irritation. This is caused by the persistent and often intense itch around the anus, and this is an important manifestation of pinworms. And what is vulvovaginitis, right? What is vulvovaginitis? Vulvovaginitis is nothing but the inflammation of the in the area near the vulva of human. It is commonly seen in female childs, and the secondary infections may take place. And enuresis. Enuresis is nothing but the nocturnal bedwetting, and this is also involuntary. And masturbation. Masturbation is nothing but the having sexual pleasure with the use of hand. Okay. So I have attached in here a picture of this is pruritus ani. The itchy red parts are shown here, and this is the vulvovaginitis. And this is also the secondary infections here. There's a red rashes all out there, and this is the enuresis. And here hookworms, there is prognosis anemia, that is iron deficiency anemia, loss of appetite, epigastric pain, perverted taste, pica, melena. Melena is known as a black color stool, as here is shown. And then round-edged papulovesicular rash or cutaneous larva migrans. So these are the papulovesicular rashes here, and these are the cutaneous larva migrans that are being showed. And then the hyperproteinemia, they causes the anasarca, edema, cardiac failure, malabsorption, and malnutrition. Here we can see the anasarca. What is anasarca? Anasarca is a full edematous body. You can see the their person presses in this place here, but it after even removing the thumb, the area where the thumb was being pressed is still visible here. So this is an edematous condition. Then the tissue nematodes. Lymphangitis, epididymorphitis, and adenolymphangitis, pulmonary eosinophilia, cough, and then which worsens at night, and intestinal infiltrations, and peripheral blood eosinophilia more than 3,000 per cubic millimeter, very high serum IgE levels, and visceral larva migrans, hydrocele, and elephantiasis. Elephantiasis is shown here. It's a characteristic clinical manifestations of tissue nematodes. And in this case we can see enlarged leg lymph nodes, and in this case the hydrocele is being shown, right? The hydrocele takes place in the testes here. So this is an proliferation, it's increased proliferation due to disease condition by tissue nematodes. Okay. And then the whipworm, which includes the clinical manifestations include the bloody diarrhea, painful frequent defecation, abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, headaches, unexpected weight loss, and fecal incontinence. This is the picture of bloody diarrhea. This is also known as dysentery, and bloody diarrhea, which is also known as dysentery. And this is a picture of nausea. In this case, a female the female is having an intense urge of vomiting. So, and in this case it shows the unexpected weight loss. Okay, you can see here. And this is the headaches that are common in case of whipworms. And the tapeworm, in this case we can see the headache, abdominal pain, abdominal distension, growth failure in spite of voracious appetite, and history of passing proglottids in stools, and cysticercosis, intracranial hypertensive syndrome, epilepsy, convulsion, focal neurological deficits, and brain tumors, hydrocephalus, and psychiatric illness. And here we can see the Here we can see what? Here we can see the brain tumors, the part where the intracranial hypertensive centers are there, causing the focal neurological deficit. And in this case, there are proglottids in the stool. And lastly, this picture shows that a child with convulsion, this is tonic phase and this is clonic phase, which you have learned before. Hydatid disease, the clinical manifestation of hydatid disease includes the large cyst with pressure symptoms, example jaundice, in liver cyst, and then lung cyst with chest pain and hemoptysis, respiratory distress. And these are the pictures along associated with these are the hydatid cyst, and these are hemoptysis, that is coughing of blood, and these are respiratory distress. As you can see, the normal and diseased condition differs very gradually. And then the diagnosis of it. So now the diagnosis of roundworms are history of illness and physical examination, and then passage of snake-like worm in stool. These are the passage of snake-like worms in stool, and then vomiting, clinical examination of roundworm eggs, and stool examination, confirmatory diagnosis. And here we can see the eggs in the stools of the infected person. Okay, this is the confirmatory diagnosis of it. And then bronchoalveolar lavage may also help. And this is the picture of the bronchoalveolar lavage. In this case, a tube is inserted in the alveolar region in order to free that passage from larval and adult infestation. Then the pinworm. In the history-taking examination of early morning perianal swab before the child has passed through, because we have learned before that in case of pinworm, the eggs are laid in the perianal region of the human host. And then cellophane tape technique or transparent scotch tape technique, so to detect the eggs. And the eggs can be demonstrated in fingernail dart in about 1 out of 3 cases. Okay, so here we can see the nail darts is there is greenish nail darts, and in this case there is the scotch tape technique. Okay, so here is a basic structure of the how scotch tape is tape technique is performed. First of all, the cellulose tape spiral is prepared, then this slide is held against the tongue depressor and 1 inch from end and lift along the position of the tape from side, and then loop the tape over the end of the depressor to expose the gum surface, and then hold the tape and slide against the tongue depressor, and then press the gum surfaces against the several areas of perianal region, and then replace the tape on slide and smooth tape with cotton ball and gauze. So these are the transparent scotch tape technique to detect the eggs. You can refer it to later. This is for your information, okay? You don't need to remember it. Hookworms, ankylostomiasis. These are the history taking, fresh stool examination for hookworm ova and occult blood, eosinophilia and serology. This is the picture of this for the hookworm ova. This is the fresh stool examination, and this is the occult blood. Okay, this is the occult blood, and this is the fresh stool examination. And then eosinophilia is nothing but this is normal. There is lesser eosinophils present here, and in this case there is a lot of eosinophils present here, and this condition is known as basically the eosinophilia. And serology may also have. Then a tissue nematodes. This is done by the Gimsha stain, thin and thick blood smear contained from the fingerprints. So there we can see there is a thick blood smear and this is a thin blood smear, and this is the Gimsha stain. Okay, so immunochromatography based card test may detect a filarial antigen, and this is the immunochromatography based filarial card kit. Okay, so you can refer to it for clear visualization of it. So in this case, Wuchereria bancrofti might bancrofti have the nighttime collection is preferred, and diethyl carbamazine, that is DEC, can be used as provocative agent to facilitate daytime collection. Okay. Then moving to the tapeworms. Tapeworms diagnosis are history taking, stool examination or examination of the proglottids, CT scan, MRI, CSF examination, blood for ELISA test, and these are all of the pictures. First of all, these are the CT scan of it, of the tapeworms, and these are the MRIs. These are the CSF examination. As you can see, the CSF examination from lumbar puncture, and these are the ELISA test. Okay. Then the hydatid disease. History of residence of closely associated with close association with dogs, and presence of slow growing of cystic tumor, X-ray of the affected part, USG, ELISA test, Kazani test. Kazani test is one of the most important tests in this case, and Kazani test refers to, it's a skin test used to diagnose the hydatid disease, and the test involves the intradermal injection of 0.25 ml of sterilized fluid from hydatid cyst or human cyst, or sterilized by sheet filtration on forearm, and equal volume of saline injected in the other forearm. Okay. So ELISA test, what do we mean by ELISA? Enzyme linked immunosorbent assay. Okay. There is pictures along with it. You can refer to it later. And then comes the management part. Management are divided mainly in three parts. First of all is medical management, and then surgical management, and then what is it? Then the nursing management. Okay. Then non-pharmacological management. First of all comes the benzimirazoles, then bowel obstruction, then blood transfusion, then iron therapy and anthelmintics, then hand washing and personal hygiene, and then health education. So now we can see the non-pharmacological management includes the benzimidazoles. Benzimidazole commonly includes the albendazole and mebendazole, and these are poorly systematically absorbed, and thus they have low toxicity, and they exert their action directly on worms. And then bowel obstruction, they may happen. Treatment of bowel obstruction includes the intervention of hydration, nasogastric suctioning, and electrolytic monitoring and laparotomy if conservative measures fails, and colonoscopy and epigastrotomy, esophagogastrotomy, esophagogastroduodenoscopy, that is EGD, may be useful in removing the obstructive masses of the worms. Okay. So the hand washing technique is extremely important in this case. Thorough and proper hand washing with soap and water before meals and after defecation is effective in preventing the disease transmission. Okay. And then personal hygiene and changing the personal habits such as thumb sucking or nail biting may reduce the reinfection. And iron therapy, that is in most cases the classic hookworm disease can be managed on an outpatient basis in a iron therapy. So these may require the both iron supplements and the nutritional supplement, that is including the folate supplementation. And blood transfusion may also require because it has the anemic conditions along with it. Then anthelmintics for patients with cutaneous liver migrants who have minimal symptoms, specific anthelmintic treatments may be necessary for it. And then health education about the avoidance of handling the stray dogs, isolation and treatment of infected dogs, and preventing the eggs from eating the infected viscera from slaughterhouse can be taken in place. So there is a pharmacological management which includes the albendazole to the 200 mg for children aged 1 to 2 years, and parenteral palmoate, ivermectin, and nitrous oxide, and the levamisole, that is 2.5 mg, piperazine citrate, and crotomethone ointment. In case of it's an antipruritic antiseptic, and this is mainly given in the pinworm, in case of pinworm, because they have the pruritic conditions. And piperazine citrate is an drug which mainly occurs into the worms, and this is a ideal drug for eradication of the drugs from intestine of the infested organisms from the intestine. Then tissue nematodes, which includes the diethyl carbamazine DEC 6 mg per kg single dose, ivermectin, albendazole, cystic corticosteroids, and DEC 6 mg per kg per day for 12 to 21 days for pulmonary eosinophilia. And then the cystose antiparasitics, praziquantel 10 mg long and kg in single dose, and albendazole, meprocin, mepacrine, niclosamide, and so on. And trematodes are albendazole twice daily for 3 days, albendazole 15 mg per kg, levamisole single dose 2.5 mg per kg. So there are the indications of surgery, right? So indications of surgery is a failure to respond to conservative line of treatment for intestinal obstruction, and if complications supervene such as perforation, strangulation or peritonitis, and then the presence of free interperitoneal gash as detected by plain X-ray abdomen or CT scan. And then surgical procedures are first of all enterotomy, then resection, anastomosis of ileum and peritoneal lavage, and then appendicectomy and squeezing of worms in distal colon. First of all, enterotomy is nothing but the insertion of the enterus in their enteric conditions, and then the removal of the worm infestation by whether suctioning or several cuts in it. And then resection anastomosis is nothing but the making a connection from the, you can see here the intestinal part is removed here, cut here, and this is again rejoined with the large intestine. Okay, this is the colostomy that has been done. Then peritoneal lavage, the line is introduced into abdomen through the incision, and it's a bedside procedure to be remembered. And the appendicectomy is nothing but cutting the vermiform appendix from the infected person, and squeezing of the worms in distal colons. And then coming to the most important part, that is nursing diagnosis. So firstly, there are few I have prepared this in the basis of the diagnosis priority wise. First of all comes the imbalanced nutrition less than the body requirement related to anorexia, vomiting as evidenced by history taking and intake output chart. So all of you might know, right? So if I was doing in this class, I would like to ask you questions about this. Is how many of you know the nursing management of worm infestation, right? So I'm telling it now, so listen carefully. I may ask question right now after this, so thoroughly listen to this. Imbalanced nutrition less than a body requirement related to anorexia and vomiting as evidenced by history taking and intake output chart. And secondly, the fluid volume deficit related to fluid loss as evidenced by diarrhea. And then thirdly, risks for impaired skin integrity related to intense perianal scratching as evidenced by history taking and physical assessment. And then hyperthermia related to decrease in circulation secondary to dehydration as evidenced by vital signs. And then deficient knowledge related to the disease process and treatment as evidenced by repeated questioning. And then pain related to mucosal irritation as evidenced by smooth muscle spasm secondary to migration of parasites in the stomach. In this case, we can also view, that is, if we talk about the imbalanced nutrition, the planning would include the physical assessment that should be done, and the body weight should be measured every day, and give adequate nutritious food and explain the importance of the adequate nutrition. Nail care should be done in case of preventing the transmission of the infection, transmission of the infection again and again. We can refer to nosocomial infection also, and administer medication as prescribed. And then in case of fluid volume deficit, that is the planning would be the maintenance of the fluid intake output chart record and observations of the signs of dehydration, and give oral rehydration solution to assess the adequate hydration in this case, because the excessive water is lost during this place as fluid volume is taking place here. So now observe the accurate intravenous fluid administration and give health education related to management of diarrhea to the patient and significant others who are present with them. And then comes the risk for impaired skin integrity, right? So risk for impaired skin integrity. So this planning should include the monitoring the site of impaired tissue integrity at least once daily for color changes, redness, swelling, warmth, and provide skin care as needed, and keep a sterile dressing technique along with you. So if necessary, you can do it. So clean the patient's nails as necessary. So teach the patient the significant others the proper hand washing techniques, and wound cleansing techniques, dressing changes, and application of topical medicines. Because furthermore, this will be important in the management, home management of them, of the in the prevention of these cases, and then administer the prescribed medications as well. And if we can see later, then there is a deficient knowledge. In this case, we should give them, we should clear their confusions along with it, which with which they are tensed with, and we have to give the proper educational informations and knowledge about to them, and we have to provide comfort to them also. And then the hypothermia is also taking place. In this case, we should always note down the vital signs here, and we should check the temperature along with the vitals, and we should note, and we should tell the family that it's very important to give accurate information about the physical status, as it is crucial for diagnostic issues. And then we can give the tepid sponge, and we can give the analgesics for reduction of the temperature, that is it's hypothermia, that is the temperature is rising, so has been rising, so we should get this. And then pain related to mucosal irritation evidenced by smooth muscles spasm secondary to migration of parasites in the stomach. Okay, so there are pain related to infection, so we should give there the proper medication that are subjected by the physician, and teach a method of distraction to reduce pain. In case of child, it may be showing the cartoon or TV shows, because it distracts them, and set a comfortable position that can reduce pain, and provide rest periods to promote relief, sleep, and relaxation. I hope it's clear, and if any doubt arises, you can freely ask after this session. Okay, then preventive measures are proper sanitation, safe drinking of water, clean and cut nails, safe food handling. And then after that, the treatment of all family members, wearing shoes, careful handling of pets, and avoidance of playing barefoot. So this is the poster that I have prepared for it, which shows, first of all, there is a picture of the proper sanitation. There is a toilet, that is a proper sanitation technique, proper sanitation of human excreta, drinking of safe water, clean and cut nails, and washing vegetables with running water thoroughly. And treatment of family members, there is a family showing 4 members and wearing shoes while playing outside, and careful handling of pets. So I have explained it further in a separate video, which would be attached to you along with it. So go through that, and if any doubt arises, you can ask. So there is also a day that should be remembered, that is National Deworming Day 2021. So NDD first round is conducted in February 10 each year, and the objective of National Deworming Day is to deworm all preschool and school age children, that is enrolled and non-enrolled, between the ages of 1 to 19 years to the platform of schools and Anganwadi centers, in order to improve their overall health, nutritional status, access to education, and quality of life. And then the complications are appendicitis, small and large intestinal ulcerations, transient synovitis, enuresis, pruritus, and intestinal pain. This is a case of acute appendicitis. Okay, and this is, in this case, we can see the abscesses here, the yellow ones, and this is a transient synovitis in human in the hip of the children. This is a synovitis condition, and this is a normal one. So conclusion, I'm going to conclude this. So worm infestation in children is a very commonly seen in India, and worm infestation remains one of the main problems in child development. And children growing up can expect to be infected soon after weaning, and to be infected and reinfected constantly for the rest of their life. So since mothers play a vital role in developing healthy lifestyle among the children, it's very important to empower those with knowledge and practice about the prevention of the worm infestation. So finally, moving to the part that is bibliography. So for I have prepared this whole topic from these 3 books mainly, so I recommend it to you also. So first of all, that comes the Dr. Parul Pediatric Nursing 4th edition, JP Brothers Medical Publishers, page number 237 to 241. And then Hockenberry, Wilson David Wong's Essential Pediatric Nursing, SVF Private Limited, page 435 to 436. And then Ghai OP, Ghai Central Pediatrics, 8th edition, CBS Publishers and Distributors. So your cooperation was completely precious, and thank you for your attention. And if any doubt arises, you can freely ask. So thank you for staying with me. Thank you all. I'm ending here my topic.